The galaxy was vast, stretching far beyond the stars humans had ever seen. For centuries, the Avara's dominion had ruled over countless worlds, enslaving species with their advanced psionic powers. No one could escape their reach. Entire civilizations fell under their control, their cultures erased, their people broken. The Avaras thought themselves superior, their minds far more powerful than anything the galaxy had to offer. On a small, barren planet called Terra 9, a young human child named Eli Harker lived under the shadow of their power. The planet was one of many that the Avaras had conquered long ago. It was used as a mining colony, a place where the Avaras extracted precious resources to fuel their empire. The workers were treated like nothing more than tools, useful for as long as they could labor and discarded when they were no longer needed. Eli had lost his parents when he was only 7. They had both died in a mining accident caused by the Avara's cruel practices. The accident was no accident at all, but a calculated move by the Avaras to reduce the number of workers. Eli had watched his parents die, his father crushed by falling debris, his mother too weak to help him. Since that day, he had been alone. The Avaras didn't care about the humans they enslaved, and they certainly didn't care about one child. Instead of being sent to the mining pits like the other children, Eli was taken to one of the Avara's highborn families. The nobles of the Avaras found humans amusing, strange, unpredictable, and weak. They kept Eli as a kind of pet, a source of entertainment, like an exotic animal to be gawked at. But the noble family didn't realize something important about the boy. They saw him as fragile, useless, and easily controlled. What they didn't know was that Eli had a spark in him, something that made him different from the other slaves. He wasn't just going to sit quietly. The family's estate was grand, towering over the small colony. It was a place of luxury, with tall windows that looked out over the desolate landscape of Terra 9. Eli's new home felt like a prison. He spent his days cleaning, running errands, and watching the Avaras go about their business. The highborn Avaras were strong and elegant, their psionic powers radiating from them like an invisible force. They spoke in calm, soothing tones, their voices capable of bending the will of anyone nearby. But Eli never bowed to their power. Inside, he was planning. He knew something the Avaras didn't. He had learned their language, their ways of thinking. He had been listening, watching and waiting for the right moment to act. He had been a slave for so long, but deep inside, there was a burning desire for freedom, for something more than this life of servitude. One quiet evening, as the stars twinkled above Terra 9, Eli stared out of a tall window in the estate. His reflection stared back at him, a small, lonely child, but in his eyes burned something fierce. Hope. And with hope came determination. He didn't know how or when, but he would escape. Eli Harker was not like the other humans. He was a spark waiting to ignite, and the Avaras would soon learn just how wrong they were about him. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Eli Harker had learned to adapt to life in the Avara's noble's estate. He was no longer the frightened child who had arrived at the mansion. Over time, he had stopped fearing the powerful Avaras, their cold, emotionless faces, their effortless control over their surroundings. The highborn Avaras were used to their power, and they never saw Eli as anything more than a curiosity, something to show off at dinner parties, something to laugh at when they grew bored. But Eli wasn't playing the part they expected. He wasn't just another weak human. His mind was sharp, alert, and above all patient. He had learned quickly how to move through the mansion without drawing attention. He cleaned the grand halls, ran errands, and delivered messages between rooms, always keeping his eyes open, always watching. The Avaras spoke in their own language, a soft, flowing cadence that was both beautiful and dangerous. Their words had power. Eli had heard the whispers of the servants who were too afraid to speak openly about their fears of the Avaras' abilities. The servants knew the truth. The Avaras could control minds. A glance, a word, and they could make anyone do anything they wanted. Eli's curiosity grew as he heard bits and pieces of the language, and he began to study it in secret. At night, when everyone was asleep, Eli would sneak into the library, a vast room filled with strange, glowing books that hummed with energy. The books weren't meant for human eyes. They were kept locked away, and the Avaras only used them when they needed to expand their psionic powers or gain knowledge about the galaxy. But Eli had learned that the books held more than just information about the stars or the universe. They held secrets. Secrets about the Avaras' powers and the strange, almost magical way they could bend reality with their minds. Eli spent hours in the library, his small hands flipping through the ancient texts. It was slow work. The language was complex and he couldn't understand all of it. But Eli was determined. He copied the symbols in a hidden notebook, trying to memorize the shapes and sounds. The more he learned, the more he felt something inside him stir. There was power here, power he could use. It wasn't the same as the Avaras' psionic abilities, but it was something. One night, as Eli was practicing the strange symbols in the corner of the library, something unexpected happened. He was trying to mimic the rhythm of the psionic language, speaking the words under his breath, when a faint light flickered in the air. For a moment, he thought it was just his imagination. But then the light grew stronger, swirling around him like a gentle breeze. Eli stopped, his heart racing. The words, they were working. He hadn't meant to do anything, but somehow without realizing it, he had triggered something. His mind was beginning to tune itself to the same frequencies the Avaras used. It wasn't perfect, not by any means, but it was a start. The spark had been lit. Eli's excitement was tempered by fear. He knew that if the Avaras discovered his secret, they would destroy him. But deep inside, he also knew this was his chance. He had always been a tool to them, something to control and break. But now he had the potential to turn the tables. The Avaras had underestimated him, and that would be their greatest mistake. For the first time in his life, Eli Harker didn't feel powerless. He was becoming something more. As Eli's days in the Avaras mansion stretched on, his secret grew stronger. What had begun as a quiet spark of curiosity was becoming something far more powerful. He had learned to tune his mind to the strange frequency of the Avaras' psionic language, something no human had ever done before. It was dangerous, but Eli wasn't afraid anymore. The fear that had once gripped him, the fear of being crushed under the weight of the Avaras' power, had slowly faded. Now, he was learning to harness that power for himself. One night, as he practiced in the dimly lit corner of the library, Eli stumbled across something that sent a chill through his spine. A hidden compartment behind one of the bookshelves caught his eye. It was small and almost invisible, tucked away like a forgotten relic. Eli's heart raced as he carefully pulled it open. Inside, there was a single ancient device, a small cube made of an unknown black metal. It hummed softly as soon as his fingers brushed against it. Eli stared at it, feeling the power radiating from the cube. It wasn't just an artifact. It was something more. Something alive. He could feel the presence of the device in his mind as if it was reaching out to him, calling him. With trembling hands, Eli activated the device. The air around him grew cold, and the room seemed to shift as though the walls were breathing. The cube emitted a soft blue light, and suddenly, the sound of whispers filled his mind. They were faint at first, like the distant murmurs of a forgotten dream. But as the whispers grew louder, Eli realized they weren't just random voices. They were speaking in a language he could understand. Awake. The forgotten one. The key. The words swirled in his mind, fragmented and broken, but they carried a weight, a meaning. Eli focused harder, listening closely. The whispers were coming from something far away, something ancient, deep within the Avaras Empire. It was as if the device had opened a door to something hidden, something the Avaras themselves had buried long ago. Then, in the midst of the voices, a single word broke through, crystal clear. Kairos. Eli's heart skipped a beat. He had heard that name before. The Avaras had spoken of it in hushed tones as if it were a forbidden legend. Kairos was an ancient AI, a remnant from before the Avaras even existed. It was said to have knowledge, beyond imagination, hidden in the forgotten corners of the galaxy. Some believed it had been destroyed, others thought it was just a myth. But Eli wasn't so sure anymore. The whispers, the device. This was no coincidence. Kairos was real, and somehow Eli had found it. As the whispers faded, Eli held the device tightly in his hands, a new sense of purpose filling him. This was it, the key to something greater than himself. But what did it mean for him? What was Kairos, and why had it reached out to him of all people? Eli knew he couldn't stay in the mansion much longer. The Avaras were getting more suspicious, and his powers were growing stronger every day. But this new discovery, Kairos, was a puzzle he needed to solve. He couldn't do it alone. Eli turned toward the dark corner of the room, where the shadows hid the secrets of his mind. He was no longer just a boy caught in the Avaras' web. He was a key, an unexpected player in a game he didn't fully understand. The whispers had only just begun, and Eli's journey was only starting to unfold. The discovery of Kairos changed everything. Eli knew his life could never go back to the way it was. The Avaras had always seen him as a thing to be controlled, a weak, insignificant human boy. But now he held the key to something far greater, an ancient intelligence that could change the entire balance of power in the galaxy. For the first time in his life, Eli felt like he wasn't alone. Kairos, though distant, seemed to understand him. It wasn't a voice in the traditional sense, but rather a presence in his mind, guiding him, sharing knowledge. Kairos told him of its long-forgotten purpose, to help free the galaxy from the tyranny of the Avaras. But to do that, it needed a catalyst, someone to spark the fire of rebellion. That someone, as Kairos had chosen, was Eli. He spent weeks carefully learning more about the device, connecting with Kairos in secret during the quiet hours of the night. He began to realize the true power of what he held. The cube wasn't just a simple artifact. It was a communication device capable of reaching across the stars. It could hack into Avaras systems, manipulate their technology, and even connect with other minds, people who, like him, might be ready to resist. But Eli knew he couldn't do it alone. The Avaras had enslaved entire worlds, and the people they oppressed were too frightened to fight back. They had been beaten down for so long that they didn't believe they could ever be free. Eli needed to change that. He needed to show them that they weren't powerless. One evening, as he was running an errand in the gardens of the noble estate, Eli saw something that made his heart race. A group of alien slaves. He recognized them as workers from the nearby mines were being escorted through the estate, shackled and dirty. The Avaras had just finished another round of punishment, and the slaves were being marched back to their cells. Eli felt the anger building inside him, the fire that had been smoldering for so long. He couldn't stand it anymore. He quickly slipped away, finding a quiet corner near the main gate. He connected the device to the Avaras' security system, just as Kairos had taught him. With a few simple commands, Eli manipulated the system, turning off the cameras and locking the gates. The Avaras wouldn't be able to track him now. Then, using the device, he broadcasted a message across the estate. It was a simple message, one that would spread like wildfire if he could get it to the right people. He didn't know if anyone would hear it, but he had to try. We are not broken. We are not slaves. We are more than they think. The message echoed through the estate's communication systems, broadcasted to every corner of the mansion. Eli didn't know if anyone would hear it, but he hoped. And in that moment, something inside him changed. For the first time, he wasn't just a scared boy trying to survive. He was a symbol of hope, of defiance. The rebellion had started. It was small, just a whisper in the dark, but the spark had been lit, and Eli Harker knew that, no matter the cost, he would keep the fire burning. As the gates opened, the slaves hesitated, but one by one they started moving. Eli didn't know if they would follow him. But the message had been sent, and the seeds of resistance had been planted. Eli could feel the change in himself. It was subtle at first, like a small crack in a wall that, once formed, grew wider with each passing day. The more he connected with Kairos, the more he felt his mind stretching, expanding. He had started, as a simple human child, a slave on a distant world, but now he was something more, something the Avaras would never have expected. The cube that had brought him to Kairos pulsed with a strange energy in his hands, almost like it had become a part of him. His connection to the ancient intelligence deepened, and his ability to understand the psionic language of the Avaras grew stronger. But the more he pushed himself, the more he began to feel the strain. His mind, while expanding, was also fracturing under the weight of the power he was tapping into. The Avaras had always been masters of their psionic abilities, but Eli was different. He was not born with their natural talent. His powers came from something else, something raw and untamed. One night, as Eli sat alone in his room, he tried to push his limits further. He had been practicing communicating with Kairos and experimenting with the Avaras' psionic frequencies. He wanted to understand more, to break through the barriers the Avaras had built for so long. But as he focused harder, something inside him snapped. It started as a dull headache, a thrum in the back of his mind. Eli clenched his fists, trying to focus through the pain, but it only worsened. Suddenly, a burst of energy exploded through, his thoughts overwhelming him in a way he couldn't control. His mind felt like it was being torn apart, stretched and pulled in every direction at once. The Avaras' psionic frequencies were too much. His brain couldn't keep up. In an instant, the pain became unbearable. Eli collapsed to the ground, his body shaking violently as his mind shattered into 1,000 pieces. He couldn't think clearly. His thoughts were a blur of images, feelings, and sounds. He felt as though he was losing himself, drowning in the vast sea of power that he had awakened. But then, something unexpected happened. Amidst the chaos, Eli felt a strange calmness, as if a guiding hand was reaching out to him. It was Kairos. The ancient intelligence reached into his fractured mind, soothing the pain, helping him pull himself back together. Slowly, the images and sounds began to fade, replaced by a sense of clarity. He wasn't lost. He was evolving. Eli's eyes snapped open, and he took a deep breath, his mind clearing. He could still feel the remnants of the psionic storm lingering in his thoughts, but it was no longer overwhelming. He had survived it. And in doing so, he had unlocked something new within himself. His connection to Kairos was stronger than ever, and his ability to manipulate psionic energy had reached a new level. He was no longer just a boy who had learned the Avaras' language. He had become something more, a force that could challenge them. But the experience had also left him shaken. He knew he couldn't keep pushing his mind like this. The Avaras might be powerful, but they were predictable. They relied on their psionics to control everything. If Eli could learn to master this power, he could break through their defenses, but first he needed to control it before it consumed him. Eli had been through the storm, and now he was ready for what came next. Eli stood on the balcony of the mansion, staring out at the horizon as the sun dipped below the barren surface of Terra 9. The sky was a deep purple, and the wind stirred the dust in the air. It was a beautiful, quiet evening, but Eli's mind was far from peaceful. His powers were growing stronger, but so were the risks. The Avaras had already begun to notice the strange disruptions in their systems, the odd messages he had sent out. Eli knew it wouldn't be long before they connected the dots. He had no time to waste. With a single thought, he activated the small device in his hand, the one that Kairos had helped him unlock. It hummed softly as it connected to a network, far beyond Terra 9. The device allowed him to communicate across the galaxy, reaching those who might still have the will to fight. These people were scattered across different worlds, living under the Avaras' control, their voices silenced by fear. Eli would change that. A faint light appeared on the device's screen, and a voice crackled through the static. Eli Harker, he stiffened, his heart racing. The voice was familiar, one he had heard before but never spoken to. Sora Valen, the leader of a small rebel group on a distant planet. She was known for her cunning and fearlessness, but she had never trusted anyone from the Avara's worlds. For years she had fought in the shadows, taking small victories against the Empire. Eli had always admired her, but he never thought he'd be the one reaching out to her. "Sora," Eli said, his voice steady despite the rush of adrenaline, "I have a plan." For a moment there was silence on the other end. Then Sora's voice returned, sharp and serious. "What kind of plan?" "I've learned something important," Eli began, taking a deep breath. "The Avaras have a weakness, their psionics, their control. They rely on it. But there are cracks, hidden fractures in their systems. I have a way to break them." "You've lost your mind," Sora replied flatly. "They'll kill you before you even get close." "No," Eli said, shaking his head, though he knew Sora couldn't see him. "They've underestimated us. They think we're weak, that we're just tools to be used, but we're not. We're more than that. I've learned things, secrets about their power, their technology. I can use it against them." There was a long pause. Eli could hear Sora's breathing, the weight of her decision hanging in the air. "All right, I'll listen," she said finally. "But this better not be some trap. If this gets us killed..." "It won't," Eli cut in. "I need you to trust me." The connection flickered and a new voice joined the conversation, a gruff man's voice filled with suspicion. "Who is this?" "This is Eli Harker," Eli said. "I'm from Terra 9. The voice on the other end laughed. "A slave boy. You're a long way from home." Eli clenched his fist. He knew the man didn't trust him. He'd heard it before, the sneers, the judgment, but he couldn't afford to back down now. "I'm not just a slave anymore," Eli said firmly. "I'm the key to bringing down the Avaras. If you want to fight, if you want to win, you'll need me. I can help you." For a long moment there was silence. Then Sora spoke again, her voice resolute. "All right, Eli. You've got our attention. Tell us what to do." Eli felt a rush of excitement tempered with the weight of what he had just started. The rebellion was no longer just a whisper. It was beginning to grow. "We start tonight," Eli said, "and we don't stop until the Avaras are gone." The night was thick with tension. The stars above Terra 9 seemed distant, cold, as if they too were watching the events unfolding below. In the darkened corners of the rebel hideout, Eli stood with Sora and the others, the glow of holoscreens casting faint light on their faces. The room was quiet, each person lost in their own thoughts, the weight of what they were about to do heavy in the air. Eli had managed to bring together a small group of rebels, those brave enough to take the risk and challenge the Avaras. Together, they had planned the first strike, a direct assault on one of the Avaras' major supply depots. The Avaras used the depot to fuel their weapons and starships, and cutting off that supply could give the rebels a much-needed advantage. It was a dangerous mission, but it was also their first real chance to strike back at the Empire. Sora turned to Eli, her sharp eyes studying him. "Are you sure about this? If we fail..." "We won't fail," Eli said, his voice steady. He had spent weeks studying the Avara's systems, learning their patterns, their weaknesses. This was their best chance to hit them where it would hurt. And he wasn't about to let fear stand in their way. "I've hacked into their security network. We'll have the element of surprise. Just follow my lead." The rebels gathered their weapons, checking them with the quiet precision of seasoned fighters. Eli had never seen such determination in the eyes of these people. They were ready to fight, to risk everything for a chance at freedom. He could see the same fire in their eyes that he had felt when he first realized that the Avaras could be beaten. As they left the hideout and moved toward the edge of the city, Eli couldn't help but feel a knot of anxiety in his stomach. This was no longer just about him. The lives of these people were now in his hands. If something went wrong, it wouldn't just be his failure, it would be theirs too. The night was still, and the only sound was the soft crunch of boots on the dirt. As they moved in silence, Eli kept his focus sharp, scanning the surroundings for any sign of the Avaras. They couldn't afford to be seen. Their mission depended on getting in and out without being detected. Finally, they reached the edge of the supply depot, a massive complex surrounded by high walls and patrolled by Avaras soldiers. Eli could hear the soft hum of energy shields keeping the perimeter secure. He knew the next few minutes were crucial. If they made even one wrong move, the whole mission could collapse. Eli knelt behind a crate, his fingers flying over the device he had brought with him. His mind was connected to the Avaras security system, and with a quick thought, he began to hack into it. He felt the familiar pressure in his mind as he navigated through their systems, bypassing firewalls, decrypting codes. It was like a dance, a delicate, dangerous game of patience and precision. "Done," Eli whispered. The energy shields flickered and dropped, allowing them a clear path inside. Sora gave him a nod. "Let's move." With swift movements, they entered the complex. Eli's heart pounded in his chest as they crept through the dark hallways, avoiding patrols and security cameras. The tension was suffocating, but Eli kept his mind clear. He knew that failure was not an option. Finally, they reached the storage area, huge tanks filled with energy cells and weapons. Eli took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. This was the heart of the Avaras' power on Terra 9. He activated the device, setting the charges that would destroy the depot's supply lines. The countdown began. They had done it. The first strike had begun. The explosion was deafening. The ground shook beneath their feet as the massive supply depot erupted in flames. Eli felt the heat from the blast even from where he was hiding behind the corner, along with Sora and the others. The air smelled of burning metal and dust, and the shockwave knocked several rebels off their feet. But there was no time to waste. The mission was only half over. "Move. Now," Sora shouted, pulling Eli back into motion. The rebel group had managed to plant the explosives in the heart of the depot. With their primary supply line destroyed, the Avaras would be forced to divert resources from other parts of the galaxy to repair the damage. But that wasn't the only goal. This attack was meant to send a message. The rebellion had begun. As they raced through the smoke-filled streets, Eli couldn't help but feel a sense of exhilaration. This was only the beginning. The Avaras had never expected this. They had thought the galaxy was theirs to control, that the people they enslaved would never rise against them. But they were wrong. The fire of rebellion had been lit, and it would spread far beyond Terra 9. However, as they reached the edge of the city, Eli's heart skipped a beat. The faint sound of sirens echoed in the distance. The Avaras were coming. They had no time to waste. "Everyone move," Sora ordered. "Get to the escape route now." The rebels scattered, running through alleyways and back streets, trying to stay hidden. Eli's mind raced. He had already sent out a signal to the other rebel cells, but they would need time to respond. The Avaras were ruthless, and they would stop at nothing to hunt them down. As the group finally reached the underground tunnel where their transport waited, Eli paused for a moment to look back at the burning depot. The flames lit up the sky, and for the first time in a long while he felt a sense of hope. This was their chance. They had struck the Avaras, and they had done it together. But just as he turned to rejoin the others, something caught his eye. A small shuttle had appeared in the sky, descending rapidly. It was one of the Avaras' ships. Eli's heart sank. They hadn't escaped in time. "Move! Eli!" Sora's voice called sharply, and he snapped back to reality. The rebel group piled into the transport, the tunnel entrance closing behind them with a heavy thud. The shuttle above hovered ominously, its searchlights sweeping over the streets. Eli's pulse quickened. They were being hunted, but he knew they had done something important. They had sent a message, and it wouldn't be long before the Avaras realized that their power was no longer absolute. As the transport sped away, disappearing into the darkness of the underground network, Eli leaned back in his seat, his thoughts racing. The Avaras were about to be thrust into a war they hadn't prepared for, and this time, it wasn't just one boy causing trouble. It was the beginning of an uprising that would spread to every corner of the Empire. Eli's actions had sparked something, a movement, a revolution, and he wouldn't stop until the Avaras were brought to their knees.